It's visible, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So our scenario was that um, there's been intervention of TAR being done in the district of UP, Vadodara. So there are like 122 primary schools for which the 98 schools were selected for the intervention, and in those 98 schools, classes from 2 to 4, few children were pulled out for the intervention for 2 hours of remedial instructions, where they are like kind of receive the remedial program. And not all the children, but the children with lower learning levels. So that was the scenario 2. And the first question was like, what would be a good comparison group for this? And the second one, what would you do to ensure the comparison group is suitable for the impact evaluation? So I guess just correct me if I'm wrong. So I think we believe that on the basis of baseline, we can compare the control and the treatment group out of 122 groups. So we have 24 schools we put in control group, and out of those we can conduct baseline study to have the status of children who are equally on the learning levels as the children in the schools with the intervention group. But then how are we going to ensure if this comparison group is suitable? So we kind of had different things listed here. Uh, for example, that teachers attendance across the district, like if, for example, we are choosing comparison group, it should be kind of similarity between these aspects, like teachers attendance, students attendance, teachers recruitment at the school, the way teachers are being recruited, teaching attitude towards children, qualifications of teacher and parents, distance of the school from the headquarters. So this point is like, um, for example, if a school is located near the headquarters where, mostly visits are being done, so most of the attention is being paid to the school, and the performance kind of changes there. Cognizant of other programs running in the non-intervention group. So probably, there might be other programs running in the school, not maybe in the name of remedial, but might be having similar kind of intervention activities that might affect the result and the impact. And the educational background of the community, probably if children are the first generation school goers, the teacher student ratio, and the representation of the gender, caste, and religion, so and so, having similar kind of things should be there in both schools. So this much we could discuss for our scenario 2. So anything else, if anyone would like to add in here, if I missed out. Over to you, Vidya.
No, I was check if Suraj wanted to say something, considering he listened to the whole conversation, actually, that part. Do you want to start? Say anything?
Not really, Dhruti. I think there were two kinds of discussions in the group. And I was passive a bit deliberately. One was about how many schools to choose and which schools. And then later it was also about the kinds of things that Megha was discussing in that the set of bullet points. What counts for similarity?
Right.
And I think that, and I think what Dvitiya also mentioned when she came to the group was ultimately it's about that, right? We have to have a sense of, from the context, what is it about the intervention schools, about their context, about the attendance, about the teachers, and so on, which we think is relevant for outcomes, right, of this program, and then we can transport those criteria to the comparison group. So yeah, so just sort of reiterating what Megha already went through. So I think there were these two levels of discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so, it's really useful that you thought about both of those. I would actually, the only thing that I would suggest in thinking process is to flip them, right? Is to first think what is important for a comparison group and then think about number, right? Because the number will also then be influenced by a lot of other things in terms of your uh, ability to manage that control group. How big do you want it? What is the funding you have to test there? Whatever it is. So I would say think about it first from what is important to match, and then think about how large do I want this group to be, right? Because the larger you go, I mean, almost you get better sort of statistical power in doing that, but you don't necessarily need to go very large. Right? And the other thing that I would say is, and I think it was being discussed in the other group at some point when I was there, is that now you can write all of these things, right? Because you're thinking, you're doing blue skies thinking in terms of what do you think is important. But when it actually comes to nailing down this particular group, you might find that you're not able to reliably collect data on some of these things, right? So you might have to just say, I like teachers' attitude towards children is a wonderfully qualitative aspect that you would have to put so much effort in trying to collect this data, right? You want to maybe go and see how they're teaching, and how do you get a sense of any of this if you want to make sure that this is something that is important towards learning outcomes. Then there's also the feasibility of actually reliably measuring this and then saying, okay, this is equal between my intervention group and the comparison, right? So there will be a certain degree of filtration that happens in terms of practicality of what can you actually reliably collect. But like I was saying, even in a context where they are fully randomly assigned at the beginning of the intervention, sometimes there are things that you can't reliably measure, right? So it's just as good an approximation as possible of what is a good comparison group, right? So um, I think you all thought of very interesting aspects. Um, and the other thing, sorry, that Rahul was mentioning in the other group, which I also think is important to think of, is what is the level the program is being delivered at, right? The program is being delivered to children in classes 2 and 4, right? So you want to think of your your comparison group also as children. So instead of saying 10 out of 24 schools, I want you to say, I want you to frame it itself as children from classes 2 and 4 in these 10 schools or something like that. So you're thinking about it at the same level as the intervention is being delivered, right? And it opens up the possibility that can you think about children in some way within the same school who could function as a control, right? I think other than that, I don't have anything else to say. Do you want to say something, Rahul, based on what you're seeing?
No, I think in the other group also, it started off in a similar manner where I think the numbers became more important in the initial stages and then we moved on to the indicators. And obviously the realization that there will be too many kind of factors to control for. And so there might be a need for prioritization. So which is the most important thing to look at and all that. So that's something.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Can you just upload this document also, Megha, to the same folder? I mean, you have a assignment folder, and just upload
Yeah,
this
yeah, I'll
document there.
upload there.
Wonderful. So we'll just give the other group, they have 2 minutes, but no, just take 5 more minutes. We'll have the other group present as well. We'll do quick feedback.
Like group 1 to share.
Yes, please.
Is it visible?
Yeah.
Yeah, Namrata, you want to go ahead?
Please go ahead. I found
Yeah.
it very difficult.
Okay, we had the scenario. Population was other schools in 4 districts of Rajasthan, 1607 schools, and intervention was being done for students from class 1 to 8, where one period every day they spent working in the computer lab on adaptive learning software. And it was evaluation of the impact of adaptive learning technology in schools. So the intervention group was 20 schools in each of these 4 districts out of those 1607. And the question was, what would be a good comparison group for this? And how do we ensure that the comparison group is suitable? So as Rahul said, we were pondering more about, the numbers, number of schools or number of children that we need to pick up. So 10% being the benchmark, I thought we said minimum 2 from each district we need to look at. And of course, an ideal situation would be having 20 from each district in the control group. And of course, where we have representation of children from all classes from grade 1 to 8. And the parameters, of course, we started listing. And as Rahul suggested, we came up with a laundry list and then prioritized some of the ones in red. The first 4 we thought seemed to have slightly better priority. And the rest, of course, are important, but can be done on a need basis. So we need to have geographical representation from different districts, of course, from other schools itself, but we need to have representation from all the 4 districts or even sub-blocks, ensuring that there is equal representation or comparative representation from urban and rural. And of course, teacher profiling, children profiling, was important. Baseline scores of the children for different subjects, whether they have access to digital devices at home, the ICT proficiency, and the subject knowledge. Basically, the intervention for whichever subject is being done through adaptive learning, and the core knowledge of the child prior to that in that subject. And for the teacher profile, education, experience, and computer proficiency, we looked at these 3 parameters, and ruling out presence of any other interventions in the control group. So we thought these were higher priority. And of course, then later comes teacher-student ratio, the parent profile, the school infrastructure, gender mix, school timings. And one important point which Rahul had said was, which or what period is getting replaced with adaptive learning. So in the control group, what are the children doing during that period? Is it if they're doing nothing, or if the teacher is guiding them for something else, etc. Yeah. Yes, Didya, over to you.
I have actually a question, and then we'll sort of address Surat's comment about my leaning towards quant in my thinking, right? So why would you? I can understand in the children profile you're doing a baseline test for their subjects, right? Why would access to digital devices at home be something that you think is going to impact your learning outcome? You want to test this because, essentially we're saying we'll test this because we want to make sure our comparison group and
we had added that. See, if in the control group, you're trying to identify a control group, and if you come across a school where the teachers are, already giving them projects or home assignments where they are using digital devices and learning something extra out of the textbook, right, or whatever is available on the net, etc. So that would change the impact.
Okay, so this is almost in the nature of any additional support received outside the school, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Because it could amount to maybe tuitions also could have the same kind of effect on what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. Because this is an actual intervention that we did do and an actual control group was chosen. So I can tell you that most of what you've done, we didn't our child profiling was not this detailed. We only did a baseline of whatever scores, I mean, whatever subjects we were interested in. And we did a basic, what is called like a time use survey with the child, right? How do you spend your time outside the school, just to get information on who do you get help from for homework? Do you go for tuition? If you go for tuition, what happens in that tuition? That kind of, how's the child spending their time outside of school? So we just did a very basic time use survey of the children to get a sense of what kind of support they may be getting. But other than that, broadly what you've indicated is what was done as part of making sure that these groups are comparable. Yeah.
Okay, so that was done in both the schools and ensured that it was like comparable.
So it was an RCT. So the schools were first randomly thrown into treatment and comparison group. And then you have to do all of this as part of baseline to make sure the randomly assigned schools in treatment and control are actually similar at the starting point, right? So a baseline measurement of all of these aspects was done to ensure that they're similar. And if not similar, you know how dissimilar, and then you can manage that statistically.
Okay.
Sorry, 1 second. I think there's a couple of things in this one. Rahul, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no, on these, again, going back to, I think we discussed a bit in the group, like when we have these kind of programs, so we are replacing one class or substituting one class with a computer adaptive. Now, what is happening in the comparison school? So that's is it being taught by a teacher with similar kinds of facilities without just the computer not being there? Or
it's business as usual.
It's business as usual, because that doesn't seem to be fair in terms of a design.
Why is that?
In the sense that you're doing something here, then what are you comparing in some sense with? So in some sense you are giving a intervention which is a computer-led kind of a teaching program, but are you saying that in some sense you'll end up saying that the computer aided learning process is better than a teacher-led learning process, something like that, whereas you are
essentially
not
that the substitution is what you want to say is that the substitution is valuable.
Yeah, but you're not capacitating the teachers in the comparison schools to do similar kind of a work without computers. In some sense, isn't that a kind of a bad design? Yeah, because I think Kamala Mukunda also raises this kind of a question in that book.
So Rahul, if I can come in, I think this is a useful question. So maybe the comparison is not between the computer aided and a capacitated teacher aided, because the control group is not doing that, right? So control group is an incapacitated teacher aided, which is what I think Dutya is calling business as usual.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because you will in the capacity building of the teacher, you are also providing some kind of support, and which is almost as though it becomes two kinds of, let's test two possible approaches to the same thing, right? So basically what adaptive learning is supposed to help you do is exactly what teaching at the right level is. It identifies your level, it teaches you at that level, right? Which is just a software is doing it, as opposed to the teacher in the class who is who's expected to do it. I think the idea is to say what happens if that level, I mean, an instruction at that level at which the child is not being given to them or is being given to them. But the important point that you also raised is the substitution piece, right? This is not in addition to what they were receiving in school. So this means that you are in some way thinking about it as, if I were to replace if I was to replace a teacher with this thing, is it any better or not for the child, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, the result of this evaluation that ran for 3 years is that for the children in the lowest sort of quartile of the class, like who are performing worst in the class, for them, adaptive learning does not help as much as having the teacher in the classroom does, which was not what we imagined it would look like, but that's what it looks like, you know. So in some sense, that interaction with the teacher, if that is being substituted out by software, it doesn't seem to help the children who need it the absolute most. Yeah. Which is also another example of what I was saying about some segments have positive impact and some have a negative impact of the same intervention based on what category of children in the class, right? So, yeah, so I think this is yeah. Sorry, we need to address the one comment that I've left behind, Suraj, about qualitative, quantitative. I realize we're a bit late, but you just want to come in, Suraj.
If needed, we can postpone it because I think this might take a few minutes to discuss. My only, the question, we can discuss it later, is the idea of comparison, right, is not about the way in which information is procured, right? It's just an idea, right? So instead of before, after, we decide that there is some other group which we think is comparable, and there is a logic of comparison. So now the way in which we collect information to act upon comparison, why is it that we automatically gravitate to numbers, right? So so we can imagine a comparison and data collection to be two very separate exercises, and we can collect information through other ways. I might have, let us say, 100 treatment schools, right, where they're running this program, and a bunch of, let's say, several score control schools, and I might decide I will not do quantitative data collection of N-line or this or that. I'll just go hang around, talk to people, do other things, right, and get a sense of what's happening in these treatment schools and in these control schools, right? And there are many non-quantitative techniques. So I was just trying to say that both discussions, both presentations assumed that information is numbers, and that's separate from the logic of comparison. We do this all the time. We compare things qualitatively, right? We compare our teachers, we compare our friends, we compare on a daily basis. We don't procure numbers. We still judge. Most of our judgments are qualitative. Yeah, but that's why I said this will take time, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize how much this was driven by my own bias, but it was completely driven by my own bias, because that's how I think mostly, and that's how I talk about measurement, analysis, data, all of that, right? So, but I think while we think about what we thought, what we sort of processed today and what is going to come tomorrow, Suraj's point is very, very important in terms of what constitutes a good measure of impact, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be numbered at all. So yeah.
I think we need a session on that entirely.
Yes. In which I will just shut up and say nothing. So yeah, but anyway, I realized. But yeah, so I said, thank you everybody for participating, and I feel like it was useful. It was definitely useful for me. I feel more comfortable in the idea that this has now been processed, like you've been able to internalize this idea of how you measure and what is causality and things like that. So I think next session will sort of pick up from here only in terms of what do you make of any information that you've collected, right? How do you understand it? How do you make meaning from it? So yeah.
Thank you, Ditya.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Vidya.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Ditya. Bye.